It's October, and where I live, autumn is in full swing. The air has a crispness to it.
Oh, sweater weather.
Sweater weather.
Sweater weather.
Oh, God, I win.
Finally, sweater weather.
And leaves are turning colors. Halloween is coming, and during the spooky season, some people say it makes them want to watch scary movies. I can see why, and I'm no different. But during this time of year, I get in the mood for a specific type of spooky film, the witch subgenre. And there's one film in particular that always leaps to my mind that I believe stands out from the rest. One based on true events, set in the famous Massachusetts town of Salem, that came out in the 90s. I think you know the one. That's right, it's The Crucible, the 1996 film based on Arthur Miller's 1953 play of the same name. Okay, I'll be honest, it's not actually a spooky film, but I still like it. I don't know why, but I like a witch-themed narrative that's without a supernatural basis. These types of films fall squarely within the drama genre. The Crucible is the most well-known of its type, and I'm going to compare it with a lesser-known Swedish language film with an identical plot structure. The film begins with a group of girls gathering in the forest. They meet with an enslaved woman named Tituba, who promises to help them cast love spells.
She wants Joe Proctor! Get her Joe Proctor again, Tituba!
Abigail casts a spell hoping Elizabeth, her lover's wife, will die. Her uncle Samuel Parris discovers the girls, who then run away. The next morning, his daughter Betty refuses to wake or rise from her bed. Several other girls in the village begin acting this way. The men call Reverend John Hale to examine the girls. There is skepticism, but Hale says there is reason to suspect witchcraft to be the cause of the girls' odd behavior. The girls, worried that they may get in trouble for their love spells in the woods, accuse Tituba of witchcraft. She falsely confesses to having met with the devil, who promises to return her to her home in Barbados. This saves her from being hanged, but sets off a whirlwind of paranoia through the village. The girls begin accusing multiple people in the village of being witches. They insist they are being harassed night and day by astral projections, spirits, and animals controlled by the witches. The judges in the town believe them because at this time, so-called spectral evidence was believed to be enough to warrant a conviction. First, the girls accuse easy targets like weird old people and mentally ill beggars within the community. Finally, drunk on power and an effort to get rid of Elizabeth Proctor, Abigail accuses her. This is a shock to the community, as Elizabeth is known for being an honest, devout, covenanted church member. Incensed and racked with guilt, John Proctor confesses to the judges that he had a sexual relationship with Abigail.
I have known her, sir.
He insists that Abigail and the girls are making false accusations for their own gain. She denies this, and Elizabeth is brought from the prison to verify John's story. Unaware of his confession and to save his reputation, she lies to the judges. John is then accused of witchcraft by his servant Mary, and is convicted. With the situation now completely beyond her control, Abigail steals her uncle's money and flees to Barbados. Elizabeth tries to convince John to give a false confession to avoid being hanged. He agrees, but when he learns that this would involve a public display of his signed confession, he tears up the confession. He is led to the gallows, where he, Martha Corey, and Rebecca Nurse die while reciting the Lord's Prayer. If you were raised in the United States, you probably had to read or watch The Crucible in school at some point. Additionally, for all my American viewers, you likely at some point in your schooling learned about the event on which it is based, known as the Salem Witch Trials. The trials are woven deeply into the fabric of American history, right alongside the first Thanksgiving and the Declaration of Independence. For those of you outside the US, or anyone who forgot the true story, here's a quick and highly abbreviated rundown. In colonial Massachusetts between February 1692 and May 1693, over 200 people were accused of witchcraft. 30 people were found guilty, and 19 of those were hanged. It's called the Salem Witch Trials, but the people involved were actually from several surrounding villages. This is important as not all those who were accused personally knew their accusers. All the characters in the play were based on real people involved in the Salem Witch Trials. However, Miller took several artistic liberties, so it's important to keep that in mind while watching the film. For example, Sarah Osborne is portrayed as being a mentally ill beggar, but in reality she was a wealthy widow. She was considered an outcast, but this is because she married her Irish servant, leading to property disputes with her adult children and other family members. The play would have you believe that only a few people were involved, with John Proctor and his wife being major figures, when there were really just 2 of the many people involved. John Proctor is portrayed as a man in his 30s or 40s, but was actually 60 at the time of his trial. He was one of the richest men in the community and had 18 children by 3 wives. Abigail Williams is shown as being a teenager, but was actually closer to 11 or 12 when she began making accusations of witchcraft against her neighbors. Today, the city of Salem capitalizes on its history by investing heavily in tourism, with witch-themed gift shops, witch museums, and spooky walking tours. The emotional hook of the Crucible is an illicit romantic affair between John and Abigail. Historically, it is unlikely that Abigail knew or ever met John before the trial. But what's important to remember about the play is that even ones based on historical events are not meant to be documentaries. If you want a documentary about the Salem witch trials, there are tons to choose from. But there's only one Crucible, and it won a Tony. But why would a historical play that plays so fast and loose with the facts be so well regarded? To answer this question, let's do some word association. Let me say a word to you. Titanic. What comes to mind? The 1912 transatlantic maritime tragedy, or the 1997 romance film based on it? Perhaps both? If you said both, you're not alone. So you know what Titanic means. You know intellectually that it was an ocean liner that crashed into an iceberg and sank. Emotionally, you know how tragic it was. But how? And why would you watch, let alone enjoy a film about a boat that sinks, killing hundreds of innocent people? If you were to describe it to someone who had never heard of it, they may at first assume it's a horror film because of all the death. But you didn't just watch it for the death and carnage, did you? Why else did you watch it? Why do people continue to reference and analyze this film? Go on, say it. It's the cinematography and the score. I mean, they're just incredible. I'm kidding. It's Jack and Rose. We love them. We love seeing them meet and fall in love. We love hating Rose's awful fiancé. We love watching Rose fight to save Jack from the sinking ship, and we cry when, spoiler alert, Jack dies because Rose didn't help him get up on that wooden thing. Jack and Rose were not real people. Do you care? Of course you don't. Without the love story, there's nothing to emotionally grab you and make you watch. Unless you're solely entertained by documentaries and the news. Hi, Dad, I'm not judging you. You don't just want to have facts slamming into you. You watch narrative storytelling through films and plays because you want emotion slamming into you. That sounds violent. I didn't mean to sound violent. I'm sorry. Inserting a love story into a true historical event is a commonly used trope to create an emotional adhesive between the viewer and the characters. I think this is done because romance and heartache are common, almost universal human experiences, whereas things like sinking ships, war, and witch hunts are not. Love stories are inserted to bridge the gap between what the viewer can empathize with and the larger foreign context of the story. Miller created a fictional toxic love affair between John and Abigail in order to show one example of how the Salem witch trials were not just an example of theocratic despotism, but also a symptom of perennial societal issues like prejudice, jealousy, and greed. All people grapple with these feelings, but when they are allowed to go unexamined and unchecked by communities and their leaders, real tragedy can occur. The witch trials were not just a feature of a religious society, they were also the outcome of neighbors' unresolved disputes and personal grudges. Miller wrote the play as an allegory on Mccarthyism. For those of you outside the US, Mccarthyism is the act of making unfounded public accusations of subversion or treason. It is also applied to the practice of making personal attacks of political opponents. The term arose after the Second World War, when fears of a communist takeover of the United States were rampant. Senator Joseph McCarthy was the name and face of this paranoia-fueled movement, although he was not the only official involved. During this period, hundreds of U.S. citizens were investigated for un-American activities and affiliations, including Miller himself. Some of those accused did actually have communist sympathies, but many more had no connection whatsoever. No matter how tenuous their affiliation with communism, these people's lives and reputations were forever tarnished. I make no effort to sway anyone's political opinion on communism or U.S. history. I just felt that a discussion of the Crucible was incomplete without a mention of the play/film as an allegory. So now let's take a look at a film I consider to be a good companion to the Crucible. It came out in 2016 and its name in English is Devil's Bride. Devil's Bride is set about 30 years before the Salem witch trials in Åland, Finland. Anna is a young woman who lives with her mother, Valborg. Valborg is the village wise woman who makes herbal remedies, delivers babies, and practices ancient folk magic and is considered a white witch by the villagers. Anna uses one of Valborg's divining techniques to learn who she will marry and finds out she will marry a man in a boat. Okay. She decides this must be local fisherman Elias. He looks to me like he would wear those shoes with toes. You know the ones. Unfortunately, Elias is married to Anna's friend Raquel. Anna gets work in the household of the town's new judge, Nils Cylinder. His mother is impressed by Anna's use of natural remedies. At a town gathering, Anna's friend Gertrude gets a marriage proposal from the bailiff Karl. Later that same night, Gertrude is raped by the village priest. That night, Anna and Elias also begin their affair. Nils' mother suffers a stroke and is attended to by Valborg. She and Anna care lovingly for her, but Nils feels morally conflicted. He likes Anna, but the village priest convinces Nils that wise women are a danger to the religious life of the town. Nils prides himself on modernizing the community, and that includes ending the practice of relying on folk magic. Karl attempts to intervene on Valborg's behalf, but she is convicted of witchcraft. She is sentenced to banishment from the island. Gertrude is dumped by Karl for not being a virgin and is later pilloried for engaging in sex work. Raquel confronts Anna about her affair with Elias. Out of jealousy, Anna goes to Nils and falsely accuses Raquel of witchcraft. More and more women are accused by their neighbors, and now instead of being banished like Valborg, they are beheaded. This includes Gertrude. After she is beheaded, Nils begins to have serious doubts about the trials. Anna similarly begins to seriously regret what she has done. To save Raquel from the axe, Anna herself confesses to falsely accusing her and to using witchcraft. Raquel is released and Anna is beheaded. Since I can't read Swedish or Finnish, I only found brief descriptions online of the Finnish witch trials in English. I know there's books out there about this, but I didn't have time to read one before making this video. Maybe I should have done more research on this, because if the truth is anywhere near as elaborate as the Salem witch trials, it's probably an epic tale. The film itself is based on the Castleholm witch trials. Nils Cylinder was the governor, not a judge like in the film. 6 women were executed, and they are named before the credits of the film. The trials were unusual because previous ones all led to the conviction of men accused of sorcery, not women. I'd actually like to see a film about that. I can't think of any films that discuss exclusively male victims of witch hunts. There is also the use of a term that was new to me, Blockula. It's a Swedish term that refers to a mythical island where the devil lives and holds court during a witch's Sabbath. I wanted to compare these films because of their strong similarities but also major differences. They're both really good, but The Crucible is definitely way better known than The Devil's Bride, which is a shame. I really like Devil's Bride and I highly recommend it. It's a well-written, well-acted, visually stunning yet quiet film that's been criminally overlooked. Please give it a watch if you can. Both films center on an illicit sexual affair between a teenage girl and a married man. I don't know if the filmmakers of Devil's Bride were inspired by The Crucible, or if the affair is based in reality. Maybe they came up with it on their own. Either way, I think Anna is a lot more likable than Abigail, but John is more likable than Elias. Seriously, Elias sucks. Devil's Bride focuses more on the friendship between Anna and Raquel. Anna immediately regrets her false confessions when she sees the damage she causes and actually tries to make it right. The Crucible places John Proctor front and center and examines his relationship with Abigail and Elizabeth. Devil's Bride also focuses a lot more on the moral dilemma faced by the judge, who is overall portrayed as more sympathetic and duty-bound. Whereas the big bad Judge Danforth in The Crucible is an unrepentant, sanctimonious asshole. The reverends in The Crucible are also way less terrible and even try to stand up for the accused.
I believe this man!
The only man who stands up even a little for the women in Devil's Bride is Karl, and he still lets Gertrude go to her death. Both films feature a teenage girl at the center, making false accusations, but both girls are also victims of inappropriate sexual contact with older married men. I don't really like that both films feature these girls as villains within their communities. Abigail is written as being extremely one-dimensional and practically psychopathic. I feel like it perpetuates a belief that young women are spiteful and obsessive, and that the older men who pursue them are just dopes instead of predators. One major difference in the visual style of the films is the scenery. Both were filmed partially on the real locations of the trials. When it comes to visuals, the Finnish coast definitely has privilege. I had no idea the Åland Islands were so gorgeous. I mean, look at this! There's all these sweeping landscapes and coastal forests, and it just takes you to another realm watching it. It's also a really dark film. I don't just mean the subject matter, I mean there's a lot of nighttime scenes that really look like they were shot using just moonlight or candlelight. Like Salem, Castleholm is a major tourist attraction. If you've been there, let me know in the comments if it's worth visiting. So that's my essay on these two films. I also recently watched a mini-series about the Salem witch trials called 3 Sovereigns for Sarah. It's phenomenally good and does not focus on any love triangle, but rather on a witch trial survivor whose 2 sisters were hanged as witches, and her efforts to clear their names. Overall, it seems to be more fact-based than the Crucible. Let me know if you want a video essay about it. Thanks for watching! I thought this example may not work since it's been over 20 years since the film came out, and its cultural impact may be too dilute for anyone younger than 20 to comprehend. Then I remembered that my students in my film class last year were in middle school and begged me to show it to them unprompted.